Welcome to Narrative Horizon, where stories come alive and horizons expand. Dive into tales that captivate, inspire, and transport you to new worlds. Let's explore the narrative universe together. Long before their paths had crossed at the hotel, Brooke had carefully cultivated her circle of confidants. Each gathering served as a therapeutic escape from the chaos of her personal life, a place where stories were exchanged over glasses of wine and moments of levity softened the weight of past hardships. The women she surrounded herself with were a diverse group, some seasoned in navigating life's challenges, others newer to the art of resilience. Together, they formed a haven for unfiltered conversations, bound by an unspoken agreement to leave judgment at the door. The inn itself, perched on the edge of a quiet, picturesque town, was more than a meeting place. It was a sanctuary imbued with the charm of old-world hospitality. From its wooden beams to the flickering lanterns on the terrace, it offered solace to weary souls seeking respite from life's tribulations. It was here that Brooke's tale, marked by betrayal and determination, began to unfurl before a captive audience. "Have you been in touch with your ex since the divorce?" one of the women at the table inquired, taking a sip from her intricately designed wine glass as the group relaxed on the terrace. Brooke paused to consider her response before saying, "No, not since I threw him out. Served him both divorce papers and a restraining order. I haven't seen or heard from him. He tried reaching out to the kids, but they ignored him after I explained everything he put us through." Ally, a newer member of the circle, spoke up curiously. "Was the split that bad? It sounds like there's still a lot of hurt there. How long ago did it happen?" Brooke sighed and replied, "About a year back. That a hole fought it tooth and nail." "It sounds like there's still a lot of hurt there. How long ago did it happen?" Ally asked gently. Brooke sighed, her voice tinged with frustration. "About a year back. That a hole fought it tooth and nail for an entire year. When he finally realized the kids wanted nothing to do with him, he gave up, signed the documents, and disappeared. Although he's been out of the picture for 2 years now. Good riddance." Her tone was sharp with lingering resentment. Ally's next question seemed inevitable. "What made you decide to leave him?" Brooke's answer was swift, her words cutting. "The divorce? Because he was unfaithful. He was seeing his old flame, Gemma Evans." From behind, a voice interjected smoothly. "Jake? Unfaithful? That doesn't sound like him at all. And as for cheating with me, I think I'd remember that, don't you agree?" The room fell silent as Brooke whipped her head around, her eyes blazing with disbelief. Well, look what the wind blew in. You've got a lot of nerve showing up here," Brooke snapped. Gemma smirked, unfazed. "And you've got plenty of gall yourself. You started manipulating Jake back when we were together. Your lies drove us apart. And now you're claiming he cheated on you with me. When exactly, pray tell?" Brooke's voice rose, sharp as a knife. 2 years ago, as you're well aware," Gemma sneered, her tone laced with disdain. "Oh, really? If I'd been involved with Jake? Don't you think I'd remember? 2 years ago, I was 5, 0 miles away in Edinburgh, Scotland, studying general linguistics and tutoring students. And I can prove it much more easily than you can prove you're even telling the truth. I just got back after 3 years abroad. And before that, I was teaching high school across the country," Gemma declared, her voice steady and unyielding. Brooke's face paled. This wasn't the scenario she had imagined, and it spelled trouble. If it wasn't Gemma, then who had her ex cheated with? Gemma pressed, her tone sharp. "So, Who did your ex cheat with? Cornered. Brooke snapped. He cheated on me, so I threw him out. But Gemma wasn't about to let it go. Oh. And in the process, you made sure he couldn't stay in this town, didn't you? Even his parents probably bought into your act. For the record, I don't believe he cheated. I think he caught on to you. Are those kids even his? Makes one wonder. She let the accusation hang in the air before continuing. Anyway, I have people to see, including Jake's parents. Brooke's face drained of color. Don't you dare. I'll ruin you if you do. Gemma smirked, her gaze icy. Life hasn't been kind to you, has it? Seems like you're using more makeup than ever to cover the cracks. Relax. Though I'll save you the trouble. I'll be paying a visit to Jake's parents, and I have evidence to clear up your lies. By the way, thank you for driving him away. Once I find him, he'll be mine. As for your threats, please spare me, Gemma said coolly. Tomorrow I start my new job far from this viper's mess. Enjoy your lemons. With that, she walked to her car and headed straight to the Van Am residence. The house was just as she remembered, stately, with 3 parking spaces at the gate and 2 towering ginkgo biloba trees planted by Jake's ancestors. The long stone pathway led to a set of wide granite steps. Parking her car, Gemma grabbed her laptop from the trunk and approached the front door. Her knock was answered by Jake's grandfather, his sharp eyes studying her. Yes, how can I help you, young lady? He asked. Good afternoon, Mr. Van Am. I'm Gemma Evans, do you remember me? It's been a while. Recognition dawned on his face. Ah, yes. Weren't you mentioned in all that mess with Jake's marriage? Yes, sir, she replied. I'm here to tell you it was impossible for Jake to have had an affair with me. I was in Edinburgh at the time, and I can prove it. Rufus, as he insisted she call him, smiled faintly. Brave of you to come. My son and his wife are convinced Jake is guilty, but I've always doubted it. So, why are you clearing his name? Gemma met his gaze honestly. Because Jake doesn't know it yet. But I plan to be the next Mrs. Van Am. First though, I need to find him. Do you know where he is? With a mischievous twinkle in his eye, Rufus revealed Jake was at St. Christopher's Crossing, attending university. Don't let on I told you, he added with a chuckle. Thanking him, Gemma mentioned she'd be working at the same university starting tomorrow. As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with Anna, Jake's mother, whose anger flared. You've got some nerve ruining my son's life and walking into this house uninvited. Get out. But Rufus growled. Anna, she's my guest. She deserves to be heard. Hesitantly, Anna listened as Gemma presented evidence of her absence during the alleged affair. Hours later, a shaken Anna expressed regret over the family's treatment of Jake. Though she asked Gemma to reconnect them, Gemma declined, noting that Jake's disappearance signaled his desire to stay hidden. As Gemma left, she spotted Jake's brother Rufus lumbering toward her car. Hoping to avoid an encounter, she climbed in quickly, though she felt his eyes on her as he struggled to place her face, his thoughts crude and dismissive. Rufus watched the broad, leaving the Van Am residence and casually asked his grandfather about her. The elder Van Am remained impassive, simply stating that she was an old friend of Jake's, while Rufus dismissed the explanation outwardly. Internally, he was determined to keep Jake at a distance for his own reasons. Retreating upstairs to his private apartment, designed after an accident left him permanently bound to the family home, Rufus brooded in solitude. Meanwhile, Brooke reflected on her life and choices. By the time her divorce from Jake was finalized, He was 35, and she was 37. Their 2 children, born less than a year apart, were now 16 and 15. She thought back to when she first noticed Jake as an 18-year-old swimmer at a 10 kilometers race. Initially indifferent, Brooke's interest was piqued when she saw a dark-haired girl helping him out of his wetsuit. Jake's athletic build, green eyes, and quiet strength captivated her. Determined to win him over, she spent months breaking through his reserved nature, eventually inserting herself into his life after his close friend moved away. Brooke's first meeting with Jake's family at a barbecue revealed a stark contrast between him and his older brother, Rufus. While Jake was lean, thoughtful, and calm, Rufus was larger, louder, and aggressive, flaunting his strength and dominating conversations. Rufus's resentment toward Jake fueled his interest in Brooke, and within 2 weeks, he manipulated her into meeting him at a hotel. Their encounter was raw and one-sided, leaving Brooke feeling used and vulnerable, especially when Rufus dismissed her concerns about protection. When Brooke discovered she was pregnant, Rufus cruelly mocked her and told her to pin the pregnancy on Jake. Desperate, Brooke followed his advice, seducing Jake and convincing him the child was his. Jake's kindness, gentleness, and devotion contrasted sharply with Rufus's brutality, leaving Brooke trapped in a web of lies. Over time, guilt and regret lingered beneath the surface as she grappled with the consequences of her choices and the complexities of the brothers' vastly different natures. After Rufus's reckless steroid use led to a near-fatal heart incident, his manipulation of Brooke intensified, planting seeds of dissatisfaction in her mind. Over time, Brooke's attitude toward Jake soured, and she began demanding more from him: more money, more effort, and more luxury, while growing increasingly critical of his every action. Jake, ever patient, endured her tirades in silence, but their children began to voice concerns about their mother's behavior and the strain it placed on their father. One evening, during yet another heated argument, Jake finally reached his breaking point. Furious, he roared at Brooke to leave him alone, his explosive response stunning her into silence. For the first time in their marriage, Brooke realized she had underestimated Jake's capacity to endure, and the resolve he would show when pushed too far. Reflecting on the state of their relationship, Jake decided to make significant changes for his own well-being and his children's. Years earlier, after being unfairly dismissed from his family business due to his father and Rufus's influence, Jake had secured a high-paying position with a competitor and established a lucrative freelance business in Luxembourg, funneling his earnings into offshore accounts. Now, he redirected all freelance income, reduced his work hours, and prioritized spending time with his children. The next morning, when Brooke stormed into the kitchen to confront him, Jake calmly laid out his decisions, making it clear he was done tolerating her tirades and reclaiming control over his life. Brooke nervously stood before Rufus Van Am Sr., her voice uncharacteristically soft as she asked, "Grandad, do you know where Jake is?" The old man studied her closely, his sharp eyes noting her distress and the cracks in her usually composed demeanor. A keen observer of human behavior, he already suspected what she was struggling to say. Choosing his words carefully, he replied evenly, "I won't confirm or deny that." "Dear, why do you ask? Trouble in paradise?" Brooke's startled expression betrayed her. Though she stopped short of blurting out an answer, her hesitation did not escape Rufus Sr.'s notice, and he decided it was time to stop indulging her facade. In a cutting tone, he remarked, "Rufus has always had some vile tendencies, hasn't he? And his steroid obsession hasn't done him any favors either." The weight of his words hung in the air, leaving Brooke visibly shaken and grappling with the implications of his pointed observations. Brooke stammered and protested, but Rufus Sr. was unrelenting. "Don't play dumb with me, young lady. I may be old, but I'm far from senile. Let's not pretend those kids of yours share Jake's DNA. Your blue eyes, Jake's green, and both children have brown. That's almost impossible genetically. They resemble Jake only because Rufus and Jake looked alike when they were younger. But Rufus has brown eyes, and you've spent far too much time in his bed." Brooke's world seemed to collapse around her as she gripped the chair for support, unable to form a coherent response. Rufus Sr. pressed on mercilessly. "You aligned yourself with the wrong man, drove the good one away, and now you're here expecting me to help you fix your mess. Whether or not I know where Jake is, I won't help you. Get out." As Brooke fled in tears, the old man stood by the window, deep in thought. Perhaps it was finally time to write that letter he had been putting off. Meanwhile, Gemma stood nervously at the Thompsons' door, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. Though she had been renting their guest house for months, this was her first invitation into their home. When the door opened, Nathaniel greeted her warmly, and she noted the deep scar along his otherwise handsome face, and his slight limp, wondering what had happened to him. Inside, she met Nadia and their shy but polite little boy, Yaakov. Over tea, Gemma complimented their stunning home, prompting Nadia to explain that its acquisition had been a long and complicated story. Though Nadia hinted that it was Nathaniel's story to tell, her eyes briefly clouded before she smiled and shared some happy news she was expecting. Thrilled, Gemma hugged her and inquired about the due date just as Nathaniel introduced an unexpected visitor. Gemma froze when she saw him. "Jake!" she exclaimed, rushing to hug him. But Jake remained stiff and distant, responding coldly, "Gemma, long time no see." Her joy evaporated as confusion and hurt filled her face. Nathaniel and Nadia exchanged glances before Nathaniel gently suggested that they use the office to talk. Inside, Jake turned to her, his expression guarded. "Gemma," he began, "you signed an affidavit claiming we had an affair while I was married to Brooke. That lie destroyed my marriage. Why would I be happy to see you?" Gemma felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her. Anger boiled within as she straightened her back, met his gaze, and vowed to set things right. She assured Jake that during her years in Europe, she had never communicated with Brooke nor shared personal details with her. She recounted a moment when she publicly corrected Brooke after overhearing her lies in a pub and how she later met with Jake's family to share the truth about her whereabouts. Gemma revealed that Jake's grandfather had hinted he might be nearby, prompting her to seek him out. When Jake hesitantly asked about the affidavit, she was unequivocal it was forged. Yet, as Gemma spoke, her honesty rekindled his trust. Relieved, Gemma took a deep breath and, summoning her courage, asked if they could reconcile. Jake stepped forward, holding her close, and asked if she could forgive him for doubting her. Gemma immediately dismissed the idea of blame, reminding him he had been manipulated. As Jake leaned in for a cheek kiss, Gemma turned her head, capturing his lips in a passionate kiss that surprised him with its intensity. Still processing the moment, Jake marveled at her boldness as Gemma declared she had been waiting for this chance since learning he was no longer with Brooke and vowed never to give up on him. Jake admitted his struggles, revealing the isolation he sought while building his remote home, and describing himself as damaged goods. Gemma, unwavering, promised to stand by him and hinted at her suspicions regarding the paternity of Jake's son, suggesting there was more to uncover. When they rejoined Nathaniel and Nadia, Gemma announced with quiet confidence that the issue between her and Jake was resolved. Delighted, Nadia teased her about her quick work, and Gemma smiled, pulling Jake closer as she revealed her intention never to let him go again. Gemma's life took an unexpected turn as she sat down to dinner with Jake and his friends, sharing stories from her past with warmth and laughter until the mood turned serious. Her curiosity got the better of her as she asked Jake how Brooke had managed to deliver a fully developed baby after a 6.5-month pregnancy. Jake admitted he had never questioned it, overwhelmed at the time by the joy of fatherhood. Nathan suggested the possibility of foul play, given the suspicious timeline, but Jake initially resisted, pointing out the children's strong resemblance to him. Nadia pressed further, asking if anyone else in the family shared Jake's features, prompting Gemma to point out Rufus as a possibility. Reluctantly, Jake agreed to Nadia's suggestion of a paternity test, understanding it was time to uncover the truth. 2 weeks later, the results arrived, confirming that both children were Rufus's, leaving Jake furious and vowing to make Brooke and Rufus pay for their deceit. Meanwhile, Brooke was spiraling, her fragile sense of peace shattered when officials arrived with warrants to collect DNA samples from her children. Knowing that her entire lifestyle depended on the false narrative of Jake's paternity, she panicked. Across town, Rufus Jr. was also cornered as police detained him for his refusal to cooperate. Jake, supported by Gemma, sought legal advice from the renowned attorney Donna Marshall, who referred him to a specialist capable of dismantling manipulative schemes. As Gemma and Jake grew closer, their relationship deepened, with Jake confessing his love, but asking for time to resolve his tumultuous past. Gemma's unwavering support reassured him, hinting at shared dreams of a life together. However, the legal battles escalated. Brooke was served with lawsuits for fraud and defamation, while Rufus Jr. faced financial ruin as Jake froze his assets and demanded reimbursement for years of deceit. Brooke, cornered, found herself aligning with Rufus Jr., who smugly declared their romantic relationship and promised to care for their children. But Rufus Sr., disgusted by their actions, firmly refused company support for their legal defense, leaving them to face the consequences of their betrayal. The room fell silent as Rufus Sr.'s quiet condemnation settled over the family, signaling the end of their reign of manipulation and deceit. Jake felt the weight of his grandfather's passing deeply, his grief compounded by the emotional toll of the will reading. 2 weeks later, as he and Gemma prepared for the ordeal, they were tailed by a black sedan, only for it to be revealed that FBI agents were assigned to protect them as part of Rufus Sr.'s plan. At the reading, tension ran high as Rufus Jr. and Randall were hostile, but the lawyer's revelations shocked everyone. Jake, not Randall or Rufus Jr., was revealed to be Rufus Sr.'s biological son, backed by genetic evidence. The lawyer also exposed Randall's crimes misuse of company funds, infidelity, and embezzlement along with Rufus Jr.'s lies about his lineage. In a violent outburst, Randall attempted to attack his wife but was restrained by guards, while Rufus Jr. reacted with fury. The lawyer continued, revealing that Randall's massive embezzlement and betrayal of the company had been documented, with authorities ready to pursue charges for fraud and industrial espionage. As Randall and Rufus Jr. were taken away in cuffs, Brooke, who had been hoping to reconnect with Jake, was left devastated by the news of their downfall. She realized that Jake would be the one to take over Van Industries, and the life she once knew had vanished. Overcome by despair, she struggled with her diminished circumstances, aware that her former life of luxury was now out of reach. Rufus Sr.'s voice turned cold as he addressed his son and grandson, refusing to let company lawyers defend Rufus Jr. against Jake's rightful accusations. He emphasized that the DNA evidence against them was irrefutable, and that Jake's demands were valid, while the company's strict rules had been violated. The tension escalated as Rufus Jr. stormed out, but Rufus Sr. warned him with venom, threatening severe consequences if he continued to harm Jake. The next morning, despite pressure from Randall and Rufus Jr., Rufus Sr. remained resolute, threatening to fire them if they consulted the company's lawyers. He then contacted his old friend, Professor Leon, at St. Christopher's University, seeking his help to recruit Jake and Gemma into the company. Leon agreed and arranged a meeting. When they arrived, Rufus Sr., frail but still sharp, asked Jake to take over the company, explaining his progressive illness. Jake was stunned, but Rufus Sr. insisted, knowing Jake's potential to lead. As they discussed the future, Jake confided his plans with Gemma to build a home for them, and their playful exchange hinted at their growing bond. Rufus Sr. reminded Jake that the company needed him urgently, as he didn't have much time left. With a plan in place to ensure Jake's safety and protect the company, Leon explained the steps they would take once Rufus Sr. passed, including a company lockdown and a secure transfer of power. Rufus Sr.'s request for privacy during his final days was clear, but Jake's desire to visit him in the clinic was denied, as his grandfather preferred to face the end alone, asking Jake to remember him as he was.